briefly about Ohio HB 413. It's pretty long. It's 723 pages. I did not read the entire thing. I was mostly interested in the area around page 184. Yep, 184, which pertains to abortion. There are a few things about that I wanted to mention. Most particularly this part, which has caught the attention of many people by this point. The physician is not liable for committing an abortion because an abortion is now a crime in Ohio, or at least it's proposed in this bill. The physician takes all possible steps to preserve the life of the unborn child while preserving the life of the woman. Such steps include, if applicable, attempting to reimplant an ectopic pregnancy into the woman's uterus. I like how they added the if applicable. I want to talk about that a little bit, but let's just briefly touch on reimplanting an ectopic pregnancy into a woman's uterus. I made another video about it in February about reimplantation. I just retitled and posted that on BitChute so that you can see it if you want to. I'll leave a link in the description to both the YouTube and the BitChute videos, so if you want to see that, you can. It's never been done. That is not actually a real medical procedure, and I'm not the only person saying this. The Guardian got a hold of it. They wrote a big article about it. It's not real. There have been claims that it has occurred. 6 years ago, when I had my ectopic pregnancy, which led to me getting a tube removed and abdominal surgery, and it was not a fun time. When that happened, I did some research and I heard about this story. I heard, little bits about this story that happened in France. It was a highly experimental surgery, but it was successful. I was really excited about that. We couldn't save my baby, but I was like, one day we're going to get rid of this really tragic problem. We're going to be able to fix it, and women like me are going to be able to keep their babies, and that made me really happy. I was sad that it, wasn't available to me, but it made me happy. And then, February of this year, I was making videos about abortion, and I mentioned it, and I was like, after the video, I was kind of like, I really ought to go look that up. And so I went to look it back up again, because I had mentioned it in passing, and I was really trying to talk about things that I could, cite the sources of, and things that I knew for certain. And that was one of those like little bit more vague gray things. So I went back and I researched it, and I made a whole nother video with corrections on my other video regarding ectopic pregnancy. I looked it up. I could not find any reference to an experimental surgery in France. None whatsoever. Finally, I hear about a man in Britain who claimed to have done a procedure like that. And I was very excited. I was like, okay, it must not have been France, it must have been Britain, even though I clearly remembered it being France when I heard about the story. Have you ever noticed that urban legends kind of tend to wander around from place to place? They never have specific names, specific dates, or specific people or places that any of this happened in. There's a reason for that. It's because they're not real. Anyway, I looked up this guy in Britain, and there was actually a man in Britain who made a claim that he had done this. He was a doctor who made a claim that he had done this 100 years ago. Since then, it has never been replicated, and there has been no documented evidence that anyone has successfully done it. So either A, he did it and he just managed to perform a miracle because it's never been done since, or B, he lied. So you will find on the internet very pro-life websites that will talk about how doctors can do this procedure. Doctors have the technology to do this procedure, and doctors simply don't want to be inconvenienced by doing this procedure, which completely ignore the fact that this procedure does not actually exist. So now it's written into a proposed law, which I have on my computer up here. Ohio, HB 413. Lawmakers believed this, which is a little scary. I mean, I get it. I'm a retired stripper with a high school diploma. What the hell do I know? These are lawmakers. These are elected people who are making laws that will govern our lives and how our lives are lived, and what we can and cannot do in our lives, what we have the freedom to do in our lives. And when I say what we have the freedom to do in our lives, I mean, I I really do believe that I am pro-life. I see myself as being pro-life. I try when I make videos about abortion to be very honest with myself, honest with the fact that I do tend to lean more pro-life than pro-choice. And I try to admit my biases, and I try not to let my own personal biases influence the videos that I make about abortion, because it's kind of an important topic, even if most people really don't care about it. And I think most people really, really don't care about it until something like this ridiculous law gets proposed, in which case suddenly everybody cares about it. And I think they care about it for all the wrong reasons. The abortion debate between the pro-life and pro-choice people is disgusting. It's a disgusting, ridiculous, childish debate. And, that's one of the reasons I kind of had to wash my hands of it in a way, because it was like, you get into the abortion debate, you start looking at the pro-life people, you start looking at the pro-choice people, you start looking at where they stand, and the vast majority of them are not being particularly honest. The vast majority of them are they're being alarmist. They're not being particularly truthful. They're being very biased. And they're making emotional arguments that don't necessarily have a very strong basis in fact. And it's really, really irritating because, like I said, high school diploma, I'm not a particularly well-educated person. I don't like having to dig through piles and piles of bullshit just to find the truth. I'm not good at it. And when you get into the abortion debate, that's all you find. Piles and piles and piles of bullshit on both sides. Both sides are absolutely disgusting. This is a perfect example. Lawmakers made a law requiring doctors, not requiring, there is an if applicable in there, so not entirely requiring, but I'm sure they're going to scare the pants off of several physicians. Not exactly requiring, but basically telling physicians that they need to perform, if applicable, an imaginary surgery to save the life of an unborn baby. That's not even the thing I find most contentious about that. The thing I find most contentious about the bill, forget the imaginary surgery, although that's a little alarming, is the fact that they don't believe there should be any abortions whatsoever unless, in all reasonable medical judgment, a woman's life cannot be preserved if she continues the pregnancy. That is a very tricky thing for a medical practitioner to determine. How sick does the pregnant woman have to be before he can perform the procedure? He can look at it and say, you're so sick that you might have a stroke, but I can't be certain that the stroke will kill you, so I can't perform the procedure. If I had the option to, I would perform the procedure. If it was me that was sick, I would perform the procedure. There's a very real possibility that you're going to end up crippled for life, but you're not going to be dead, so we can't do the procedure. Those medical situations do arise. And doctors who work in obstetrics are very well trained professionals who understand that there comes a point where it's advisable to do a procedure, and maybe it won't kill you yet. But I don't like the wording of the law. I don't like the way that it's written out, because if you have to wait that long in order to preserve your license to practice medicine, if you have to wait that long to do something that you might have done as a reasonable medical practitioner at an earlier stage of the pregnancy, and that woman dies, it's because of the stupid law. I do not believe that when it comes to medical matters, a doctor's hands should be tied, and I believe that the wording of the law is too restrictive. That's what I find most contentious about the law. I don't care about the fact necessarily. I do find it a little disconcerting that they've included an imaginary medical procedure. I don't like the fact that they've left very, very little room for doctors to actually practice their medicine. I think that's I think that's not good. I think I think that if it was anything other than pregnancy, it would be abhorrent. So, for example, heart surgeons. You can only perform this life-saving heart surgery if your patient is this close to death. They can't be this close to death. They have to be exactly this close to death. You can only perform it if it's going to absolutely kill them. You can't perform the heart surgery if they're at risk of, severe loss of limb. If they're at risk of being crippled for the rest of their life. Well, you can't perform it then. But, if they're definitely going to die, then you can perform it. Let's give you the most narrow window we can possibly make for you. And again, I consider myself pro-life. But the thing about being pro-life, if you're being genuine and honest about it, and if you're not just letting your emotions run you willy-nilly all over the place, if you're really pro-life, you're going to want to preserve the maximum number of patients' lives, and the woman is a patient too, not just the baby. So I get annoyed a little bit by things like this. I get annoyed by the abortion argument overall. I made a lot of videos about abortion. I read a lot of stuff on abortion. I find it a fascinating subject. I find it fascinating on many levels. Pro-life. I had an abortion. I have a bit of perspective here. I believe there are circumstances that arise, which, by the way, this bill absolutely makes no allowance for whatsoever, where strange medical things can occur in a pregnancy. You can have a medically non-viable pregnancy, and it is excruciatingly painful to be pregnant with a baby that you know is going to die. I know. I've done it. It is excruciatingly painful to give birth to a stillborn baby. I haven't done it. I chose not to. Because it is excruciatingly painful. That wasn't the only reason, and that definitely wasn't the primary reason, but it was part of the logic there. I had the option. I was in the doctor's office, and she was like, well, technically we can simply induce you and you can just give birth to a dead baby. And I was like, no, let's just take the other method. I initially asked her which one was going to be more painless or less stressful on him, my son. Which method is going to cause less distress to him, because I'll take whatever is going to be easiest for him. I don't care what it's going to do to me. And she was like, at this rate, the way it's done, the way it's performed, he's really not going to have a chance to feel anything either way. I know that pro-life people, they'll say that that's a lie that the doctors at the abortion clinic tell you. It's not exactly a lie when you're sitting in a very, very nice hospital. We happen to live next to one, so that's a good thing. In a very advanced hospital, and a doctor who also teaches obstetrics at the university is telling you they're not going to feel anything. They're not going to have the chance to feel anything, to the best of our knowledge. And oh, by the way, because I'm a very distrustful person, I went and looked that up. I made sure. I looked up everything I could about the procedure, about whether or not he would feel any pain, about how fast his death would be. Was it going to be fast? Was it going to be lingering? Was he going to feel any discomfort? Was he going to suffer? Was there any chance that anything bad was going to happen to him? I read it all. So when people tell you that the doctors are lying, they might be lying in the abortion clinic, but they certainly weren't lying to me, because I double-checked. Sometimes these medical procedures do arise, and there's just nothing you can do. I've made several videos on YouTube. I haven't moved them over to BitChute because I assume nobody's going to want to watch them. If you do want to watch them, leave a comment. I would be happy to move them over and load them up for you. I talked about alobar haloprosencephaly. It's a visually very horrific disease. It's incurable. and more often than not, it results in a stillborn baby. There was one case I found of a baby with alobar haloprosencephaly who survived to her first birthday. One case, only one that I ever found. Some of these diseases are extremely fatal, and I personally did not believe that it was right to bring a baby into the world so that the first thing he could do was turn around and die. That felt cruel, and I was not going to do it. So when I look at things like, I looked at the Georgia heartbeat bill. I liked the Georgia heartbeat bill. I actually liked it. What was the other one? God, I can't even remember the name of the other one. Was it Louisiana? There was some other state. I looked at them. I didn't like it as much, but most of these places, they still make allowances for people like me in situations like mine. Ohio decided not to, but they also decided to include an imaginary medical procedure, so I don't know how far they're going to get with that. I'm going to assume, and maybe I'm overestimating humanity, I'm going to assume they aren't going to get very far. Like, I know that there are already doctors writing in to their lawmakers like, hey, you are technically asking us to do something that cannot be done. And also, I would like to, I don't want to see, I'm trying to envision a world where doctors attempt to do a procedure like that, knowing full well that it can't be done. Like, it would be damaging to the woman's uterus. It would put her at risk for infection because there would be dead tissue inside of her uterus. It could lead to her becoming sterile because of the infection from the dead like tissue inside her uterus. Like, you can't do a thing like that. It doesn't work. God, it doesn't work. But anyway, I think I've gotten pretty far off topic. I'm kind of rambling tonight. Like both sides of the argument, I'm trying to get back to that. Both sides of the abortion argument, they're disgusting. The pro-life people will tell you stories like this imaginary procedure that doesn't work. They will pass that off as a real thing. It's not true. They make emotional arguments about, all these babies are being murdered, and, there shouldn't ever be exemptions for any of these reasons. There shouldn't be exemptions, which, by the way, Ohio 314, no exemptions. So, they really tried to make that work. I mean, I hope it doesn't work, partially because of the imaginary stuff, but partially because of the real stuff that they're just not making allowances for. It's like no allowances for genuinely very tragic situations that could occur to people who didn't do anything wrong. Like, I have many issues with elective abortions. Oh, by the way, the pro-choice people, I just said the pro-life people are disgusting. The pro-choice people are disgusting too. They're disgusting. When I got kicked out of Planned Parenthood, like, I was seeking an abortion because I had this non-viable pregnancy, and I went to a Planned Parenthood, which was a huge mistake, and they treated me like a cow. Like, they treated me like cattle. They herded me around back and forth. One of the nurses, I swear to God, one of the nurses punished me for being less than cooperative. I was angry because they wouldn't let my husband come in, and I looked upset. I looked upset. And so she sent me back outside to sit in the waiting room until I could cool off. And they didn't give us any kind of explanation for what they were doing. They didn't tell us why we couldn't do things we wanted to do. They didn't explain anything to me when I had questions. They were horrible to me. It is the worst medical care experience I've ever had in my life. And I was given an unnecessary surgery one time. Like, it was really bad. I worked in medical care at one point in time. I realized that I'm a retired stripper with a high school diploma, but that doesn't mean that I didn't, work in medical care. I worked in a nursing home. I worked in a home for the mentally disabled. I worked on an ambulance. You don't treat a patient like that. It was an awful, awful experience. And so I wrote about it. I posted on a women's forum, like, hey, this is what happened at a Planned Parenthood that I went to seeking an abortion. This isn't okay. This isn't okay. The way I was treated on this occasion wasn't okay. We don't treat patients like this. This is a big problem. This is a big problem. This is very alarming to me. And everybody called me a liar because pro-choice people are just as emotional in their arguments. They're just as biased. They're just as separated from fact as the pro-life people. You know, the claim, oh, my uterus is more restricted than your guns. That's not true. Like that's quantifiably not true. But you know, people don't care. They just make these horrible, really, really poorly thought out emotional arguments, and that leaves me sorting through all the bullshit from all these terrible, terrible arguments that people have constructed, and I don't like it one bit. I mean, I find it fascinating as a subject. Abortion is a fascinating subject, and half the reason it's fascinating is because nobody will bend on it. Nobody will make any kind of compromise on it. You know, the Georgia heartbeat bill actually did make compromise on it. I really liked that one. It didn't allow for elective abortions. It essentially banned elective abortions, which, you know, got all the pro-choice people up in arms. But I'm looking at it and it's like, well, if somebody actually needs an abortion, though, they can obtain one. If they're raped, they can obtain an abortion, which they ought to be able to be given the choice. I'm not saying they should take the choice. I'm not saying they should have the abortion. I'm saying they should have the option because all their other options have been removed from them. Let them have a choice. And of course, in situations like mine where the pregnancy is no longer medically viable, you know, it's kind of nice to think that I'm not going to be required to carry around a dying baby until he dies on me and then give birth to a stillborn baby, which was the 72% probability in my case. For all the other percent, of course, there was the chance he would be born alive, but once born alive, there was a 50% chance that he would be dead within a week. So, yeah. Our backup plan was basically to put him in hospice care and try to keep him comfortable until he died, which was going to be sooner and not later. You know, and if it sounds like I don't care, I care. If it sounds like I'm emotionally removed from it, you know, I put on a good show for the camera. You don't see me crying in the meantime. You really won't see me crying in the meantime. And honestly, it's been a year. You're not going to see me crying too much even in the meantime. I'm okay. But this stuff pisses me off. I've talked to people who seemed quite irrational to me, but that was my own impression of it, that believe that any law that restricts abortion is a good law. We don't care about the people who are governed by these laws. We just care about winning that Supreme Court battle. And that's another thing that just absolutely disgusts me about the pro-life and pro-choice arguments. Everybody wants to win. And that's all they do. I want to win. My team wins. Me. My team wins. Pro-life, pro-choice, it really doesn't matter. They all start to sound the same after a while. All I want is for my team to win. That's all I care about. Pro-life, at least, they believe that they're saving lives when they make those stupid claims. And they are stupid claims. Pro-choice, I mean, I understand that there is an argument that they're trying to prevent human suffering, but it's just so drowned out by the whole, my team should win. It's really hard to actually get the message for all of the, I don't know, the selfish ideology. It gets frustrating. But I have talked to people who believe that, you know, ends justify the mean. Whatever law gets passed through the Supreme Court, you know, whatever law comes about, that's what we care about. All we care about is making a fetus into a human being, legally. Nothing else matters. And I think that's a very short-sighted and horrible way to look at the world. The temporary steps, the small baby steps that we make, the little tiny changes in the law, those matter too, because they affect how people live their lives. Change shouldn't necessarily be rapid, especially when it comes to laws. Change is going to be what it's going to be. You can't force it. And you can't, even if it's the right decision, even if it's the good and noble decision, you can't force these things into being. It's inorganic and it's not going to work out very well. And so you can't just make a law saying, well, we can't have exceptions for anybody at all, except for these very, very small people in this very, very small window, which is highly restrictive to how doctors, I'm not talking about like abortionists, but actual doctors practice their medicine. That's not okay. People have to live under this stuff. This isn't okay. I mean, I hope that everybody realizes that. I'm pretty sure it's going to get shot down because it's obviously not okay. But we'll see what happens. I'll talk to you guys later.